there's something that's captivating about that. So I think a lot of bakers have, a really keen sense of curiosity, and they're also pretty driven to kind of always improving. It's one of those living things where you can't ever be done with learning about it.
Grain is fundamental to civilization. It is literally the foundation of civilization, and a good slice of bread and butter is my death row meal, my desert island essential, really a foundation of my life, as well as civilization that we all share. Anyway, today we are talking all things grain with Pippa James. Pippa, along with her partner Michael, is one of the founders of GrAiNZ, which celebrates all things wheaty and rye-ish. Pippa, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thanks, Dani. It's great to chat with you.
Yeah, excellent to chat with you. Tell us a little bit about GrAiNZ with a Z.
Yeah, well, GrAiNZ with a Z is spelt that way because the A is capitalised and the NZ is capitalised. So it's all about localising grain economies in Australia and New Zealand and connecting people within those economies to strengthen them. Post-COVID, there's been less of the NZ emphasis, which we hope to change going forward. But going backwards, we've been going since 2014 was the first gathering, and we hosted that at Tivoli Road Bakery, which was the bakery that Michael and I ran. It really started via an Instagram conversation between Michael and Ian Lowe from a Peace Bakery in Launceston. They just wanted to get people together and share knowledge and contacts and chew the fat, I guess, about their day-to-day. So that first gathering was like 20 people, pretty much all bakers, just around the benches at Tivoli Road Bakery. And it's grown from there. It's moved every year or every time that it's been held. There was one in New Zealand, Small World Bakery in South Australia has hosted, Dust Bakery in Sydney hosted, and then Redbeard hosted GrAiNZ in 2019, and they really pushed it into a large format gathering, almost a conference style event. We had international speakers, which, that kind of international connection all grew out of some travel that a bunch of Australian bakers did, connecting with people in the States and the UK. So that's kind of the potted history of it. And we just held the first post-COVID large-scale event on the 1st and 2nd of May, so just a month ago, which sort of followed the same format. We had, a bunch of speakers talking about all different facets of the grain economy. It's really grown from that small bunch of bakers to include growers and millers and academics working on wheat breeding programs, and a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, well, I was thrilled to be part of that GrAiNZ and to attend the one that you mentioned in Trentham. And I have to say, it's just, I don't know what it is about bakers and brewers who are, all about the grain, but just the best people. The atmosphere at these events is really just really beautiful. Is that you guys making it like that, or do you reckon bakers are just ace people?
I reckon bakers are pretty ace people. I think there's something about the alchemy of turning a small grain first into flour and then via a process of fermentation into something that is so sustaining and delicious. There's something that's captivating about that. So I think a lot of bakers have, a really keen sense of curiosity, and they're also pretty driven to kind of always improving. It's one of those living things where you can't ever be done with learning about it, I guess. So, I think those kind of people that bring curiosity and also a lot of generosity, the way that GrAiNZ has evolved purely as a space to share it has always been done with a lot of generosity. And I think that's part of what brings that lovely vibe. It's also it's a bit solitary, baking or growing or milling. The farmers might be, they're out on their farms, and they're not always connecting with people that are doing the same thing in the way that people who go to an office might be. So the opportunity just to actually connect in a personal way and share stories and share tips and knowledge and learnings. That also contributes to that lovely vibe.
I think also, bakers so often work pretty odd hours that aren't really in the same rhythm as the society or the communities that they look after with their products. I mean, do you think that's part of it?
True. Yeah, absolutely. So it's nice to be around people that sort of understand that as well. I know, like, when Michael has been baking, he's done various schedules, the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. schedule, or he did for many years 3 a.m. till whenever he finished. It's punishing. It's really brutal. So to step away from that and then just to connect with people that get it is really refreshing for them, for a lot of them, I think.
Yeah, that's I'm sure that's part of it. So Pippa, what were some of the highlights of the recent GrAiNZ for you?
Well, we launched this year the John Reid Fellowship. That was a massive highlight. So as I mentioned, the most recent GrAiNZ before COVID was held at Redbeard Bakery in Trentham. John Reid was the owner there, and following year, he was diagnosed with a really aggressive brain tumour, and he passed away in 2021. So it was the first time that everyone had gathered, and after his death, we got talking with Tammy Jonas, who is the president of the Australian Food Sovereignty, Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, and established a fellowship in John's name. He was somebody who was a massive advocate of sustaining and sustainable grain growing and sharing. So to gather again and kind of commemorate him, launch that fellowship was really beautiful. We also had, I think for the first time, a pretty even gender divide and a more diverse program than we've had before, and that was super nice. We had a really lovely diversity panel, which you know all about because you moderated it. That was a real highlight for me. It was just so nice to hear those stories shared with vulnerability and generosity.
Yeah, there was so much to love. I also really enjoyed doing my babka workshop with Mariasha Werdiger from Zelda Bakery, and just, I guess, speaking of diversity, just leaning into that that Orthodox Jewish culture that she's able to share through what she does. It just, so much, I guess, so many different skills and interests and passions and obsessions that come to bear on all of these things. But Pippa, I'd love to talk more about John, because he was such a beautiful person and a key figure in the artisan baking movement, a sourdough movement in Australia. We were really super honoured, and it was incredibly moving to have him on the podcast, I think in April 2021, when he had been diagnosed with the brain tumour, and spoke about the impact that it was having on him and his family. He knew that he was going to die. He was incredibly philosophical, and I think never really lost sight of the meaning in his work, which was profoundly affecting for me. It was just such a big, generous person, just leaves such an incredible legacy. Tell us about John.
John was just so vital, and passionate and committed to the cause of real food as a way of connecting people. He was actually a teacher before he was a baker, and he was super passionate about sharing knowledge. And, you know, he used to do open mic Friday nights where at his bakery where anybody could turn up and bake with the team and, you know, get their head around that enormous wood-fired Scotch oven. So he was super generous with his energy and his knowledge. And just, yeah, like a real lover. so easy to be around, and interested and curious and excited about good things. He was also absolutely an activist for better food systems, and he was a real connector. He introduced us to just some of the best growers we've met. He just, you know, had those deep and broad networks of people that just were quietly toiling to do their bit for the earth and the piece of land that they were managing, and their communities. He was a real community builder. And, you know, the family at Redbeard is just so tight and so lovely, and that's a testament to his energy.
Yeah, so beautiful. And I mean, tell us more about the fellowship. What is it, and what do you hope will come from it?
So the fellowship is a stipend or a pool of money that has been raised through various means. And we're calling for applications for people working within the grain community or wanting to build on a project that celebrates good grain, good people, good stewardship of land. So it can be people across, you know, that's a really broad spectrum. GrAiNZ started with bakers, but it's, you know, now brewers, we had malters. So anybody that's wanting to push into those kind of areas and, you know, develop networks and good agriculture, I guess, and good product across those things. So it's really open. We're just calling for applications that want to try something, and we've got a little bit of money that we can throw at those projects to support that, and then in turn strengthen the networks that we've already started to build.
I mean, what are some examples of connections that you've really appreciated, perhaps fostered yourselves between growers and millers and bakers?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest one is around Victorian growers. You know, wheat is one of the biggest commodities that's exported from Australia. There's masses of monoculture wheat grown in Australia, and most wheat is grown in that way in conventional farming, monocultures, and I don't know, it's you know, synergy around timing, but we've met really great growers who are seeking to strengthen the diversity on their land, and you know, they're looking at diversity from a sustainability perspective. They're looking at some of them are looking at, you know, Indigenous grains, flavour, nutrition. It's, you know, so interesting. And that we didn't come across when we first opened our bakery. That's fairly recent and has really been strengthened by GrAiNZ, and that's the kind of thing that we see as opportunities with the fellowship.
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, for people who haven't thought about this much or perhaps aren't sure why it's a problem, what's wrong with monoculture wheat? What's wrong with this way of farming?
Well, I think we're seeing now, there's so many ways to answer this question. So in the 1950s, wheats were bred to be dwarf wheats and fast growing in order to address growing famine. So modern wheats are grown to be short, they grow quickly, they get harvested as they're short, and then they have to be replanted. So traditional older wheats tend to be perennials, so the roots stay in the ground. They feed the soil, they capture the carbon, they do all that stuff. And modern wheats have been bred, so even the last 70 years, that's really changed. So there are so many problems. The lack of diversity depletes the soil. The chemical use depletes the soil or harms the soil. Because the roots are shallow, they're not drawing nutrients. First the soil's depleted, and then the roots are so shallow that they can't actually reach the nutrients in the soil. So the nutritional value is decreasing of modern wheat. And then the way that a lot of wheat is processed is it's roller milled, and the dense nutritional parts of the grain are discarded to create white flour, which is very shelf stable and reliable, and a lot of people like to use in their home because they know what it's going to do. Whereas if you've got it's a slight diversion, but that's a problem with that kind of growing. Yeah, if you've got more diverse grain and it's processed in a way that leaves the grain whole, so you're accessing the diversity of the nutrition available, it's so much better for your body. And we're seeing so many allergies and intolerances come up, and we're not giving our bodies what our bodies are designed to access.
And I think it's that density of nutrition and the satisfaction of eating some sourdough made with really awesome grain is so different to eating some sliced white bread from the supermarket.
It's just not even the same food. It's kind of insulting that stuff is called bread.
Yeah. Well, who came up with sliced white death?
John.
I thought it was John. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. He championed it. I don't know if he was the first person, but he certainly, and that it is, yeah.
He had sliced white death on T-shirts and what else, on cups and all kinds of things.
Yeah, all kinds of things. He was so passionately against it.
Yeah, but it's true. It's just a different food. I don't know, food feels like a kind word as well. But, humans are just, with all good intentions, I guess, humans are thinking we need to feed everyone. Let's grow the food faster and make it, more consistent. You can see the motivations aren't evil. It's just like we just have got so off track as society.
I forget the guy that really drove that development into dwarf wheats. I forget his name, but he won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work in feeding millions.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's just just a sort of embedded misguidedness that as a benevolent God, you could look upon kindly, oh, those silly humans. But then here we are, living on Earth and trying to make the best of it. And I think, what you said before about this shelf-stable box of flour that people have in their home pantries and the reliability of it, and how that's to me seems to be so much part of it, that consistency, that you know what you're reaching for, and conversely, the people that are part of the GrAiNZ community, they celebrate difference and a sort of instability, and it's a different way of living, really, isn't it, where you build in a kind of a necessity to be responsive.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's skill building. Bakers they really nerd out on learning off each other and developing their skills. So having to be adaptable is skill building. And it connects us to the land. It connects us to the seasons. I feel like, to get to your point about, a benevolent God might say, poor or silly humans, we are kind of living in the results of this massive social experiment of globalisation and industrialisation, and it's not really working out for us.
We hear this term local grain economy thrown around a bit in this world. Can you tell us, Pippa, what that means?
Yeah, well, as I said, grain is a big commodity. So a lot of our wheat goes overseas, is highly processed, goes overseas, and it doesn't really support local communities within Australia. It means that we have an over-centralised food system, which, as we've seen in COVID, is extremely fragile, lacks diversity, causes, massive emissions in the food miles that they generate. So, yeah, those are the kind of problems, those big global problems. And, we saw again during COVID that the local food systems, the people that knew their farmers, the people that supported their farmers through that, they could get the food that they wanted. When lettuce was however much it was in supermarkets, it was still $2.50 at the farmers markets. Because that, those local economies are more resilient in times of shock.
I think one of the big or the kind of orthodox arguments against all of this, cosy farmers market life is the billions of people that need to be fed and, the scale of everything. How do you talk to people about that?
Well, I believe that localisation is the way that, communities were built and societies were built. I recognise that I have massive privilege in being able to shop at farmers markets and choosing to do that. But I also feel like because I have the access to it, I also have a responsibility to support that, because the more people that can do that, it will grow those localised things. Then you're supporting actual farmers. You're not supporting, your dollars are going, or the community's dollars are going to a broader range of people, and you're not centralising economic benefit to a few people at the top of the chain who then squeeze everyone below them.
Yeah, well, that's really powerful to have this sense that it's, sure, you are lucky, and it is a privilege, but it's also being part of the change.
Absolutely. I mean, food is one of the big emitters, one of the big causes of the climate crisis, and the more people that can change that, reduce emissions, eat locally, eat seasonally, support, economically support their local communities, that's so sustaining on a personal level and a community level. The economic system that we live in, where corporations are treated like people or they're legal entities into themselves, that only exist to generate profit for the 1%. It's drives inequality. It's crazy. I can't get my head around it.
Yeah, well, I think it's really exciting that you've got this fellowship, the John Reid Fellowship, which, I mean, I am so keen to see who applies for it and who's awarded some funds, because I feel like whatever they are doing is going to be part of creating this change. We just need more and more people who are questioning the way that things are and, looking at really tasty and enriching ways to do things differently.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we do. And, education is a part of that. A lot of bakers complain that, they can't get their customers to buy whole grain bread because people are so obsessed with large open white sourdough crumbs. And, it's just once you taste that and understand the process behind it, that white open crumb sourdough is just so white. It just tastes so white and bland. But it's just a shift in perception.
You know what I'm going to do when I get off this call is I've got a loaf of Zelda rye bread and I'm going to toast it and have it with lots of butter and just, celebrate the grain.
Yeah. Can't go beyond that. Yeah. Nothing better than great bread and great butter.
Yeah. Pippa, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And congratulations on another beautiful GrAiNZ. And with this added really meaningful and poignant John Reid Fellowship, which, I know is going to just is such a fitting testament to John and everything that he brought to this community. I know he would just absolutely love it.
Yeah, he would love it. He would say, "You bloody ripper."
Awesome. Well, that's a great place to leave the conversation. Thank you, Pippa.
Thanks, Dani.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat.deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.